What's up, amazing listeners? Claudia here, joined by my research wizard, Alex, for another episode of Not Your Average Breakdown podcast. I've got questions. Alex has the answers. It's the dynamic duo you never knew you needed. Together, we're turning current events upside down, inside out, and shaking out all the juicy parts. Alex, what is up?
Claudia, you're bringing that elevate energy to 2024 podcasting.
Let's go. Let's
I
go.
love it.
I didn't tell you this particularly until we got onto this podcast, but I want to tell you something that happened this week. I was out to dinner with a friend and we decided to sit at the bar, which left us open to chat with people around us. So we were talking to this one guy in particular, and after a while, he stops me and he goes, "Wow, you ask a lot of questions." And I swear to God, I just stopped. I looked at him and I just burst out laughing because I think I'm becoming an inquisitive interviewer in my personal life.
I love it. Did you tell him? Well, funny you should mention, but I
I
actually have this
didn't
podcast.
even. I didn't even because I don't like to brag and flex like that.
You
But
skipped a free promo for us
I
right
did.
there.
I did, but I just laughed because I'm like, this podcast is bleeding into my personal life. I'm literally accosting people with questions.
You're just realizing that this podcast is literally my life.
It's so true. I mean, I guess that my life manifested the podcast. I guess that's how it worked, or the other way around. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out, but I thought that was super funny, and I wanted to tell you.
That's funny. I'm surprised you were like just realizing that, considering you and I had these conversations literally since day one we met. I don't know how we didn't come to a conclusion that we should record earlier. Like we literally spent years discussing all of these topics.
Everybody says that though. Oh, we should get a podcast. We get a podcast. But then, we realized, well, you know what? It took you going, bet. Let's start recording on Tuesday. And I was like, no, no way. You don't really mean that. And then literally we were recording that Tuesday. So life took a weird turn.
It did. It really actually, do you remember how we discussed this? It was the conflict in Israel that sort of spiked this whole
Yes.
whole podcast, which is an insane thing really to think about.
Yeah. And if you're listening to us now and you haven't heard our Gaza episode, you should go back and listen to it. It's worth it.
And it's our most listened episode, actually. I don't I don't know why that one just sort of probably because it's controversial and we covered it quite early. I think now we will probably cover it differently. I think considering that it's over 100 days that they've been fighting over there, but it was just happening and it was one of the first conversations that we had where we discussed potentially starting a podcast. So
Yeah,
but
but I think that is a heavy one that a forum like this breaks it down and makes it relatable and understandable for people. And we just took, less than an hour to explain a really long-term complicated situation that was happening. So I think that a lot of people just I think we piqued a lot of people's interest.
yeah, I agree. I would agree with that.
Yeah. Well, all right. So this week, fasten your seatbelts literally as we
Literally.
unravel, literally, and you'll see why. We are going to unravel the high flying mystery that took place on Alaska Airlines Flight 1282. This topic is triggering for me, especially because I'm obsessed with traveling, yet I have a fear of flying. So when we talked about this, Alex, I literally said I'm probably going to lose sleep over this, but we got to cover it anyways.
I was going to ask you that as I was prepping for this podcast. It came to my mind a couple of times. I'm like, I hope Claudia is going to be okay with this topic. I don't want to freak you out. And I also don't want to minimize the impact of what has happened. And Boeing itself has several issues that have been going for a couple of years. So I will try to bring you the facts, but also try to put you at ease because I know we have a flight coming up soon. We're all going together to Georgia, and so we definitely have to address that because I know you have fear of flying. So
I do, and I also have drugs. So we can get through it. So, but we need to hear this because just the pictures that I posted about this flight and the door plug were enough to trigger me into having some feels. But maybe if I learn more about it and understand what happened, maybe I'll find, who knows, maybe some comfort. I don't know, but let's do it anyways. Everybody's got to hear it.
okay, so we all know that on January 5th this year, Alaska Airline was taking from Portland, Oregon. They were flying to California. Within the first 5 minutes of that flight, this door plug flew off. And it is series of fortunate events, and I say fortunate, capital letters, that nobody died that day.
Can I ask you where the door plug ripped off? Was there anybody sitting in that row?
No, and so
Oh,
that's one of the like lucky circumstances considering like what was happening. What happened is the Boeing 737 Max Model 9, they designed this door opening as an option for, depending on how many seats the airline wants to put in, they can put in additional emergency door. Well, this one did not need that additional emergency door, so they put in like this door plug sort of in it, to, because it has an opening, so they just sort of patched it. But still the patching has to be very stringent and professional and like the highest quality, right? Because
yeah,
planes flying. It's
yeah.
it,
I mean, it's just flying thousands and thousands of feet in the air.
yeah, exactly. I mean, and you're flying like hundreds of people at once, and you know, I don't want to start off this podcast by scaring you away right away, but when an airplane crashes, like it kills pretty much everybody. There's very few people that survive that, so like the casualties are huge. Not that having less casualties is better, but that is just the magnitude of how much safety they have to, like, safety has to be imperial for anybody, not just Boeing. The problem became when they didn't screw that door the right way.
They didn't screw the door on correctly?
Yes. So there was some loose parts. So it was a manufacturing fault. Like, it was not a design fault. It was just some shoddy job. That's really what it was. Their quality control is like pretty much non-existent, and I'll get into that in a few moments.
Is this for
But
Boeing's quality control?
yes. And so that is what happened, right? They started taking off and they were going up in the air, and like as I said, in like first 5 minutes of them taking off, this door just pops off. Luckily, number one, nobody was sitting in that seat. If somebody was sitting in that seat by that door, they could have been like killed or injured. That's like the best case scenario, because one of the other things that were fortunate enough is that because they were taking off, everybody still had a seatbelt.
Oh my god.
Because everybody had a seatbelt, they were secured to their seat. I don't know if you've seen that report. Me and Alan were laughing about it because everything that wasn't strapped pretty much flew out, right, from the pressure. So I guess this girl's iPhone flew out of the door, and they found it on the ground still working.
Oh, okay. Well, I just wanna make a side note here. I am never unlocking my seatbelt again on
I
a plane.
never do. I never do. Just as, I don't know. Not I'm not scared of flying per se, but I don't know. Like, what's the point if I'm just sitting there?
Yeah.
It doesn't, for me, it doesn't make any difference. So I just keep it on. They weren't that high. If they were supposed to be at like 30,000 feet, but they were only at 16, which was it's a huge difference when it comes to this, right? The air was not as pressured,
Mm.
and so nobody got sucked out. And so really it was like 100 and something passengers on that plane, and nobody died and nobody had any severe injuries. There were a couple of people that had concussion and stuff, and I feel like it's a lot of panic, which is justifiable, right? So
Yeah, I mean,
um,
I wonder when that happened, did something alert the pilots? I mean, how did that work, you know? Is there something that goes off, you think?
it probably, with Boeing, you can't know. And I said I'm gonna get into this, but Boeing has a history of lying to the regulators, lying to the FAA, lying on their reports, and just doing all sorts of unethical and illegal stuff, putting their passengers in danger. So I'm not really sure. I haven't really find that when I was researching, like, if there was a like a black box transcript or a recording from the cockpit. But
Yeah, I'm curious to how quickly they were informed about the problem, you
I
know?
mean, this happened within 5 minutes, of them taking off.
Right, but
So,
from like when that door got sucked out, how long until the pilots realized, "Oh my god, we need to not keep climbing," you know?
oh, I mean, I feel like they figured that out right away. Like, there's when a part gets detached from a plane, like they get notified immediately. So by that time, like they knew it. Now, if they got any type of advanced notice, like that it's
Mm,
gonna come off,
mhm.
probably not. But Boeing in recent years had, especially 2023 that I'm talking, they had a couple of instances where there were some emergency lights coming up, and they like the pilots would take off and like lights would turn on, and like nobody knew what was happening. Luckily nothing happened, and all those flights made it to their destination. But it's just scary to think about that. However, I'm going to go even deeper. So I don't know if you remember, in 2018 and 2019 there were two planes that went down like months apart. One
Where?
was one was in Indonesia. It was Lion Air, and it was a Boeing 737 Max, and it crashed like pretty much 10 minutes or less after they took off, and they couldn't like figure out what happened for a little bit.
I probably blocked it out
Yeah, probably.
for
Don't
survival purposes. Okay.
worry, that's why I'm here to
Yes, yep, to release the
unlock
trauma.
that trauma for you, exactly.
Yes.
So that happened October 2018. 189 people died. And in April of 2019, Ethiopian Air crashed the same. They were taking off, I think, from Addis Ababa. I think they were flying to Nairobi, and they crashed. And everybody on the plane, 157 people died. It was the same 737 Max Boeing.
What the hell?
What happened is like series of events that led to this. And if you're interested, or if our listeners are interested, there is a really good documentary on Netflix. It was probably done like in 2021, I want to say, and it's called Downfall, the Boeing, or the case against Boeing, or something like that.
I don't know if I can watch that.
It's not that scary, from like flying perspective. I think it's more like understanding what happens when a company goes bad. And
Oh,
that's really what it was. It starts off, saying how Boeing is like, it's an American sweetheart, all American brand. They were known for quality and just, safety. And mind you, like Boeing makes military aircrafts, and they're like one of the largest aircraft manufacturers. So,
yeah, it's a household name.
yeah, exactly. Everything was going well. They were putting a lot of emphasis on quality and on like how they produce their things. Like nothing was done fast, nothing was done, half-assed. Everything was, they just put in everything they had into it. But in 1997, they merged with McDonnell Douglas, which was another competitor, aircraft manufacturer. What they were focusing on was meeting the Wall Street numbers.
Oh.
So they started cutting on quality control managers, the good manufacturing practices. They started cutting on how they design things. They just started cutting costs everywhere they could. They cut people while they kept raising salaries of the executives, but like every year they just kept cutting people in the manufacturing facilities. And that's what you get. Years of neglect and shitty business gets you in a position that they were in first in 2018.
Do they
What?
know what the 2018 incident, why that happened?
Yes. So in early 2000s, Airbus, that's the European
Yeah.
competitor, they came out with this. Well, I should preface with this. Manufacturing an aircraft or coming up with a new design for an aircraft is like it's a 10-year process. It's not something that, you go brainstorm today and then you go into production and 6 months later, like you have an airplane. That it's 10 years of design and getting parts and trying to figure out if they're going to fit and if they're going to be good and if they're going to stay and can they source them all the time and how long is the production going to take. And then in the production, when they have a prototype, they have to fly it, they have to test it, they have to take it overseas. They have like so many things goes into making an airplane. That's why they're so expensive. Airbus in early 2000 or early 2010s, I guess, they came out with this brand new design that had a bigger engine and bigger motor that was using less fuel. And that's really what it is, right? For airlines, the less
Efficiency.
fuel, exactly, efficiency. And that's what they were banking on to raise their profits, right? And so Airbus sort of became the leader. All the airlines in the world like just started, ordering them because that's what they wanted. The price of fuel keeps going up. I mean, we talk about that in, anytime you mention inflation, you mention like, oh, have you seen the price of gas, right? Like last summer we've seen it and went up to like 650 or something in California. So, the prices have been historically going up for, last 2 decades. And so Airbus found, found a way to please the customer. Boeing didn't have that. And so their sales started dropping because all of these other airlines started buying Airbus models. So instead of, spending 10 years on this new design where they're going to improve the motor and get better fuel efficiency, they decided to take one of their old designs, which is 737. I mean, 737 is like in 2010s, it was like a 40-year-old plane, right? Like
Oh
it was
God.
smaller. It was smaller. It was, designed for that time. It was great design 40 years ago. And since obviously they upgraded, they like add certain features to it, but structurally nothing changes, right? The motor and the engine and the turbines, everything that, makes the aircraft go, they don't change that. And that's what they came up with. So that will take them less time. They're gonna just adjust the design on this 737 airplane. And they added a bigger engine and those like big, what are they called? Like, the two things that
Propellers.
what are they called?
The propellers.
Yep, that. So they got bigger and they had to push them out a little bit, so they can like fit the new design. But because they added bigger components to the aircraft, they had to adjust the stability of the aircraft.
Right.
Because now it's heavier. And so, the aircraft has to be at a certain level. It cannot be like this, it can be inclined or decline, like it cannot take a nosedive. So there is like a sophisticated system that goes into it, and they decided to upgrade it. But one of the things with the whole thing with this 737 Max was that they're gonna update it, but they're going to make it cost effective for the airlines, which means that they're not going to require any training for the pilots because the pilots are already flying 737 regular. And so that was their selling pitch. So they had to make it happen that they're going to create this new airplane, that it's going to be cost efficient in every sense to the airlines that are buying them, that it's going to save them on fuel, and it's also going to save them on pilot training because pilot training is very expensive. They have to fly to a certain location, they have to do flight simulators, they have to actually test the plane, they have to learn all the new parts and stuff, and all that is money out of the airline's pocket. So they didn't want to do that.
This
But
is a terrible idea. I just want to put that out there. I know it's a given, but this is a terrible idea. Continue.
terrible idea that we're talking about this, or
Yes.
terrible idea?
No, okay, kind of both. Yes, but terrible, terrible, terrible.
Okay, I'll give you some better news towards the
Okay.
end.
Okay,
I'm
because
gonna.
my heart is racing.
I
Okay.
know. I figured. So they're appealing to these airlines, telling them, "Hey, we're gonna give you the fuel efficiency of the Airbus for an eighth of a price, essentially, because it's not gonna require a training, it's not gonna require this and that. So like you're gonna save some money in it." So the airlines ate it up, right? They ordered like a record number of these aircraft because they were trying to save costs. And it's like, oh, well, the pilots already know how to fly a 737, and that was it. But what they did is, number one, when they were testing for this system that they put in, it's called MCAS. Don't ask me what it stands for. It's like four super long words. But essentially, the MCAS system was installed to balance the plane.
Okay.
So when the plane was taking off and sort of going up, it made sure that it wasn't stalling, sort of like going down, and that once they reached a certain level that they could like adjust and just float. What they didn't do, obviously, because this is a new system that pilots had to be trained on, they found a way around it, and they put it in the manual. So like in the manual it's still there, but the pilots don't know about it. They don't know what happens when it gets triggered, they don't know how to turn it off. And so that's exactly what happened with both planes. So Lion Air in 2018, the one that crashed in Indonesia, they started taking off, and like in first few minutes, they realized that they had an issue. Like some lights came up, and it was saying that they were like increasing their speed, and like all these lights were flashing, and they couldn't figure out like what the fuck is wrong because they're flying this plane like every Tuesday. They didn't know what to do. They went into panic. They did everything what they were supposed to do based on their training that they previously received for 737, but unfortunately it was not good and they ended up crashing. The FFA obviously sort of started paying attention to it. They opened up an investigation into Boeing, but Boeing, because they have a lot of money and they're a corporation, and we talk about lobbyism all the time,
Here we go.
they just lobbied the shit out of everybody, made sure that everybody who went on air said that it's a perfectly safe plane. They started bashing Lion Air because they were saying if a US pilot was flying it, that would never happen, which is super racist to say. Not Malaysia, Indonesia hit them back and said, well, the pilot actually that was flying it, he received training in the US. So fuck you. And they were saying eventually they recovered the black box, and everything like in the cockpit that was happening was recorded, and they did everything by the manual.
Yeah, but
Boeing,
you don't know what you don't know.
exactly. When you don't know that this MCAS system exists, how you're
Right.
supposed to turn it off. Boeing was like, oh, it's a one-off, like it's a pilot's fault. Pretty much that's what they blamed it. Shitty training, they didn't have the experience, it's Indonesia, whatever. Now, April 2019 happens. Another plane goes down in Ethiopia. The same exact thing. Boeing goes out to the public and says, Boeing is perfectly safe. This has nothing to do with us. Well, now you have two planes that went down like within 6 months. So the FAA and Congress get involved. They're like, hold up, bitch. Something's happening over here, right?
Bullshit. Two of the same planes go
Exactly.
down.
I know you're scared of planes, but like flying is one of the safest ways of transportation. Plane crashes really do not happen very often. And unfortunately with Boeing, but also fortunately with Boeing, this is a fucked up way to say it, but there's no better way to say it. It's only this one aircraft. It's only 737 MAX because they did so much work to it. So like the other planes that they're designing didn't have any of those issues. It's always 737 MAX. It's because this series is what they were trying to push. And they just keep patching it up instead
Right.
of stopping, making a right design, keep producing what you have, stop producing 737 MAX. You know, but they're up to like 787 right now. So
Yep.
why do they keep pushing this?
They're Frankensteining the plane.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I don't even know why they're so hung up on this model. Just retire it. The model that crashed in 2018, 2019 was Model 8, and the one that happened with Alaskan Air is Model 9. But so it's like it's a same airplane. They just do these like little shitty updates to it, and they think they're gonna have a different outcome. But anyways, in when the plane went down in 2019, that's when Congress was like, wait a minute, something shit is happening here. So they opened up an investigation, and they ended up doing a subpoena to Boeing, and they handed over like all these documents. And they like the documents were just fucking outrageous. They had these like internal memos that the safety controls were saying like this shit should not be flying. This is not a good thing. They had test pilots saying this thing should not go overseas.
Oh my God.
They had like people coming on record saying how like this is a terrible job, how this MCAS that they're installing, people need training on it because it can, depending on your altitude and on the weather and like all these different factors that go into flying a plane, that MCAS can turn on or turn off. And if you don't know that it's on or off, you can't react. And like in one of their testing, it showed that if you don't react within first 10 seconds of that thing going on or off or whatever it does, like you can recover from it. So imagine you have only 10 seconds, but you don't even know that it's there.
Right.
They had all these like emails and memos and like people's testimonies that they were testing and manufacturing and producing, and they were just like, nope, nope, nope.
They should be in jail, all of them.
And I'll get to that as well. One of the things that I also did is that they did like an independent study, if you will, of they like pretty much paid a third party to evaluate this new latest and greatest 737 MAX. And the company pretty much said that it's not safe to fly. Not only is not safe to fly, that also in like if it's in air next like I don't exactly remember. It was like if it's in the air next 5 years, at least like 17 planes are gonna go down.
Okay.
Like like the number was insane, right? So pretty much when they heard that only 2 planes went down, they were like, oh, this wasn't so bad.
This is sick.
I know. So Congress is investigating them. FAA ends up grounding all of the planes, which happen right now as well in 2024 with the Alaskan Air. All 737 MAX 9 series are grounded that have this specific door or don't have a door, if you will. And so, but what happened in 2021 when FAA was investigating them, they ended up charging Boeing for trying to defraud FAA. And what they did is they submitted false reports, false claims. They tried to pursue FAA to approve the plane to be safer flying when it wasn't. And here it comes again. Because of their heavy lobbyism and donations to the FAA, to the congressional leaders, which is completely legal, FAA ended up settling with Boeing. when people settle, we already discussed this, nobody gets charged with anything. Nobody goes to jail. It's on nobody's record. It just gets pushed under the table. They settle for $2.5 billion. That is peanuts to Boeing.
Oh,
Okay. $2.5 billion is nothing. I know you and I privately discussed like 1MDB accounting fraud. It's that Malaysian fund that it's the guy that funded Wall Street, Jolo, not Wall Street, Wolf of Wall Street. It's the guy
yeah.
that funded Wolf of Wall Street. So there was like this whole like Malaysian government tried to invest some money, and this guy defrauded it, and he was partying up with like Paris Hilton and Kim Kardashian and Leonardo DiCaprio, and he like funded the entire Wolf of Wall Street production, and then like he's still on the run because it was Malaysian government money that he was spending in like Hollywood and partying it up in Vegas and stuff. There are like countless documentaries about him. One just dropped again on Netflix. I think it's called Man on the Run. But there's like 5 or 6 documentaries about this specific case. But the reason why I'm bringing it up is that Goldman Sachs, the devil of the banking system,
Oh, God.
they I
I
hate
love when you, I love when you spill the tea or you
I
bring
know.
the receipts. I love when
Listen,
you bring the receipts.
they're literally the devil of investing. They anything that happens with accounting and financial frauds, Goldman Sachs is involved. Like they have been involved since Enron and forward. In the
This little podcast that could is going to get shut down by Goldman Sachs now. Thank
no,
you. Thank you.
the lobbyists are gonna shut us down.
I know, exactly.
Goldman Sachs was involved in this 1MDB deal. They knew it was corruption, they knew it was fraud, and they did the deal. Okay. When everything came to light, they ended up being charged. I think it was 2017. They got charged by the SEC and they paid a fine. And the executive of Goldman Sachs, this is why I brought this story up, said it is easier for us to put a reserve account for any type of fines that the government might fine us for our shady business than doing the right thing. Because doing the right thing is going to make them lose money. But paying a couple of $1 billion for them is nothing when they make trillions.
Did they publicly say that?
So it was like an anonymous statement,
Oh.
but pretty much saying this fee is nothing. It's like 2% of whatever little fund that we have.
Mhm.
So they have a standing reserve account where they keep a couple of billions of dollars in case they get fined by the government. The government brings up the case. They're like, oh, yeah, sure, we did all this. Let's settle. We'll give you a few $1 billion. Call it a day. That's exactly what Boeing did. They ended up settling because there is no jury, there is no trial, nobody's involved. We're not airing any more dirty laundry. And they paid $2.5 billion. $500 million went to the victim families that died in both crashes in 2018, 2019. And 1.7 million went, or 1.7 billion went to the airlines. So because they had to refund the airlines for like all these shitty airplanes that they bought. That was 2021. Fast forward to 2023, as I mentioned, they have been having some issues. Fortunately, no planes crashed, but pilots were reporting that these lights were turning on and that like stuff was just happening. And this brings us to January 5th, 2024, when this door just flew off. And I'm going to reiterate this again. Only 2 US airlines were flying this plane, which was Alaska Airlines and United. No other airline uses it. They use other models of Boeing who are perfectly safe because they have been using the same design and same manufacturing for decades. This specific one that it's so troubled is because of that whole like, let's get a bigger engine and increase our fuel efficiency to compete. And they just kept making these crazy flawed designs to this specific 737 MAX. 737, perfectly safe because that's the original design. 737 Max, horrible design, horrible manufacturing. And so that's one thing. I know it's a scary thing, and I know you're scared of flying, but Boeing in general, I would say, like, most of their planes are safe, but these 737 Max series are just, they're gonna, it's taking such a huge hit on their reputation that they might even go bankrupt if they don't figure something out and like really take a, inside look into their organization and like, what do we want to do? Because if they don't stop, they're gonna go bankrupt.
Have all of these Max planes been grounded?
So Max 8, which is the one from 2018, 2019 that had issues, I think it's like only a couple of them that are flying, but they were grounded for since 2019 to like late 2020, and the FAA was like heavily involved into reinspection, retraining, and everything. So they fixed the design on the 8 series.
Okay.
Um, so that one is flying, but I feel like it's not very popular because airlines are staying away from it. The Series 9 now is grounded pending investigation to figure out if any further action needs to be taken. But as I said, only United and Alaskan Airline were flying these specific ones. I never flew on it, to be honest. They're not that common. They're huge. They're made for like long flights, overseas flights. So they like, unless you're a frequent traveler to like the other coast or to Europe or Africa or, one of those parts of the world, you might get a chance to fly on a bigger plane because they need bigger planes, for the climate that they're gonna experience. But the flights that we take, we actually the most because I like American Airlines. That's my favorite airline, despite of everybody else says I don't like United. And American Airlines usually flies Airbus.
All right. So now I have to strategize how I travel in the future.
Yeah, I mean, you can't live in fear because then you're not going to live your life.
Oh, I know. I mean, I travel anyway. It's just not easy. I travel anyway. I don't let it hold me back. You know that, but it's not an easy feeling.
Oh, I
But
know.
I wanted to ask, what did they do for the people on the last plane that the plug blew out? How did they compensate them?
Alaska Airline gave every passenger $1,500, an immediate payout for like any immediate expenses that they might have. And then they provided them with 24/7 hotline for mental health if they want to speak to somebody after they experience all the trauma.
I hope that's for life.
I know. And but there is a class action suit against Boeing going on right now, and that I'm certain that's going to bring some more stuff because the regulators now are going to have to get involved, and they're just going to have to find a solution for Boeing. I mean, I know everybody loves them, and they're all American brand, and when you have hundreds of people dying in the matter of like a few years, you need to, like, this needs to be stopped.
You need to change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Every mistake costs way too many lives.
One life is,
Right.
too much.
This is like another
That like,
level. Yeah.
no, exactly. The previous CEO of Boeing, I forgot his name, but man, you see him in the congressional hearing. Like, he didn't even look at the victims that were the victim families that were sitting there, and like he was just so arrogant and so full of himself. Like, oh, you're like,
I
Jesus
hate it.
Christ. Yeah, it's pretty bad.
See, this is why I have you to watch all that stuff and then filter it for me because just hearing that just enrages me.
I know. I love any type of true crime, especially when it comes to financial crime, accounting crime. And this, it's for me, it's like both exciting, but also like it enrages me because
Yes.
people live like this. But this is why I chose to be a forensic accountant, to like bring these people and companies, organizations, shitty as such, to justice and pay. And I mean, if that means paying $2.5 billion, then that's what it is now. But obviously, they didn't learn anything from
No.
their lesson in 2021. So
No, but we learned through this. I actually learned a lot today. I feel like it was a really good conversation because I knew none of that. And now I understand what these stories relate to. And it's not just this contributing to this fear that I have. It's very specific. So I'm actually glad that we covered this.
yeah, I really wanted to make sure we discussed that, because I didn't want to bring more fear to you, because it's really not about that. Is this one company and this one specific plane that they just seem not to be able to give up,
Right.
and their arrogancy and ego is just taking over.
Right. And now it's being addressed. So there's that.
Hopefully, yeah, exactly. Hopefully it's going to be addressed in the right way, not just them settling and calling it a day.
Right. Well, folks, I don't think I'm going to be in the fetal position tonight, and that's a relief. But it's a wrap on this episode. So I'm kind of glad, even though it's not as bad as I thought it was. I'm glad this is a wrap. So if you've got thoughts, questions, or just want to shoot the breeze, hit us up on our email at nyabpodcast@gmail.com or any of our social media platforms. And I know in particular that Alex is going to announce a new one that was added. So go ahead.
Yes, we are on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, or X, and our handle is NYAB Podcast. And as of yesterday, we are on YouTube. Our handle is NYAB Pod, and we are posting all of our shorts over there. And hopefully, eventually, we are going to be able to do some live streams over there, and maybe upload the entire episodes where people can watch us.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
exciting and
Yes.
terrifying, but more exciting. So we love to hear from you guys. So whether you prefer email, DMs, or meme tags, and we definitely love a good meme tag, let's keep this conversation rolling, people. So thanks for hanging with us, and I hope we'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone.